Hi, and welcome to a new edition of the Florida Daily Show. I'm your host, Lindsay Randall, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. Wanted to introduce our guest host today, Mr. Ron Davis. Ron, you're a legal analyst. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How about you?
Good.
Happy to be here.
Yes, it's a great day to live in the sunny state of Florida.
Yes, it is.
So Ron, wanted to discuss with you a new initiative that has come out of Tallahassee just last week. This is straight from the Florida Daily News channel, and it is an announcement from our state, from the Florida Attorney General James Utmeyer, that there's a new statewide initiative aimed at helping law enforcement agencies crack unsolved cases by leveraging advanced forensic DNA testing and genetic genealogy. I am psyched about this in a world where there is such terrible news, where we are bombarded by negativity. I feel like this is a breath of fresh air. This is something that is going to bring both sides of the aisle together. Who can be against this? Mm-hmm. I'm really excited that some of these cold cases are going to be cracked after so many years.
I was actually surprised when I read the article. I would have thought that had already been in place. You would have thought there would have been a mechanism in place where they could constantly cross-reference these old cases. So as DNA databases were updated, you might have evidence that was collected from these cold cases, because right now, up to now, it's been case by case. In other words, you got to say, okay, well, we have to reopen this case, and then we've got this knife from 1972. Let's go ahead and run the DNA. I would have thought that had already been done, where they would have tested these and they would have had like for instance, there's a knife that from 1970s that had blood on it, and it's just sitting there. Right? You would have thought they would have already run the DNA on it,
right?
And then it would be in a database, so that if somebody's DNA popped in, that there would already be a cross-reference. Maybe on a federal level and some of the things they've done. But it's refreshing to know that that's actually, they're going to start compiling all this information, getting that stuff done, so that it makes it so much easier as new DNA evidence comes in from, you might have a defendant who was 20 at the time, now who's maybe 70. Right, but you can still say, okay, this is the DNA, it came from them. It may not result in a conviction, but you may get answers for the family.
Right.
And you might have victims that, Ted Bundy, I think we just found out just recently that there was a victim that came up that completely unaware of. So there may be, cold cases that may be linked to serial killers, but at least families are going to begin to have some answers, even if they can't get the justice, either because maybe the defendant's dead, or maybe the case just isn't strong enough, because DNA is not always going to be the overriding factor. But you're going to have that situation where I got an answer. I now I know what happened, because you may find out, the defendant may be dead, but there may be witnesses alive that somehow are linked to that. So there's so much more information that are going to be gathered. So I think it's a great thing for victims and victims' families.
I completely agree. I was really kind of surprised about the amount of cases that are still unsolved. Mm-hmm. Florida currently has more than 21,000 unsolved murder cases. Those are someone's children that it's still, as a mother, I can't even imagine what I would feel like if my child's killer was still out there or on the loose, and there was no actually, you can't process what that would even be like unless you're in that situation. But at least it doesn't bring the person back, but at least there's some sort of kind of end to it psychologically. There are nearly 900 cases involving unidentified human remains. Mm-hmm. Officials believe advanced DNA analysis and forensic genetic genealogy could play a critical role in resolving some of these. And unlike traditional cold case efforts that rely on individual case submissions, which you were just talking about, this new initiative is designed to operate proactively on a statewide scale, identifying cases where biological evidence may still yield answers. Is this being done across other states, or are we one of the first ones?
I've heard it be involved in other states. For instance, I'm aware of a case in Maryland where it was a situation where decades after the fact, they arrested somebody, because they had found their DNA on a knife. So I don't know if that was one of those cases where they, what happens typically is you have a cold case team that goes back in and picks a file, then they try to redo the file, and then if there's DNA in there, then they have it rerun. What this is different, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, this is getting that information from those cold cases that are currently dead, getting that information, identifying whether or not there's any biological samples or anything of that nature which you could obtain DNA evidence from, or other analysis, because it's not just DNA, there's other analysis that can be performed. With the newer technology, you can identify maybe materials found on a body to maybe narrow down specifically, rock matter, metal matter, maybe where that body might have been at to begin with. There's decomposition techniques now that are so much more advanced back then that you can get material from bodies that you would have never been able to. So as I understand, this program then compiles that side of it, so you don't have to go back in and reopen each case individually. They're all reopened, and then as new evidence comes in, then you can cross-reference against that so much more rapidly. Right. That's the way I understand the program. I think it's a great idea. As to whether other states do it or not, I don't know. I'm aware, we hear these all the time about cold cases being reactivated and then do new DNA. I don't know if it's as a result of a program like this, or if it's just a result of their cold case programs going back in and just happening to reopen that particular one.
Right.
But it's a great idea.
I agree. What I like about it too is, you hear from time to time that some sort of DNA sample will trigger the release of someone who was unfortunately, they will be exonerated, and that is also part of this too, which I think is really going to be great. So how will this affect, state attorney's office and all that? I mean, do you think that it will help us solve these murders faster with this program, or do you think that has anything to do with it?
No, I don't. I think what the backlog is going to be on the sheriff's office initially, probably to get that stuff in, identify the cold cases, the materials they have sitting around. There may be cold cases from the 70s that none of this is going to make any difference. It may just be witness only. Maybe that they didn't have any DNA. It may be they found a body and they don't have anything further. It may be that somebody disappeared and they don't have any evidence, DNA otherwise. It could be, all kinds of different crimes. But to the extent that you have the DNA or other biological samples, then I think the sheriffs or the police departments, that's where the initial burden is going to be, and then as they get the hits. So it might increase the state attorney's caseload. What's going to make those cases hard, quite frankly, is so much time has passed on a lot of them. Witnesses right. And other testimony that would otherwise be available. If it's
like
a murder,
the witnesses, because they're not around anymore.
If it's a murder, obviously you never had a witness, you had the victim anyway. But let's say it's a rape, where the victim just died. Well, she would be the one that would be able to testify and identify this person. You may have DNA, but that person could come in and say, yeah, we were dating. So of course my DNA's there. That link between those would be different. So just because you have DNA doesn't mean you've got your case. So I don't think it'll create a smaller caseload for individual state attorneys throughout the state, because I don't anticipate that 21,000 cases are going to be open and all of a sudden every one of them is going to have information. They'll trickle in as more information comes into the databases, and the databases are expanding. You've got them nationwide, cross-reference with the FBI, CIA, all kinds of different things. And then you got federal entities trying to consolidate and share that information. And then how do you share it with the states? So it's a lot of complexity, but at the end of the day, it'll be a marginal increase, I think, for state attorneys. It's just the evidentiary issues are going to be a little bit different than try to solve something that just happened recently.
Do you think there's any privacy concerns with any of this?
Well, there always is, right? You got HIPAA and everything else, but those out, you have to weigh those, cost of getting somebody off the street that may have committed a murder or committed another heinous crime. But I think families will probably tend to want medical information and things like that released to get those answers to what you talked about earlier. It's what happened to my loved one, who did this, answer that question for me. So there's always that overlap, but I don't think it's going to be an overriding concern.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that what is just really heartening to me is there's there's been so many unsolved mysteries over the years, and I think this will help families.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to move the needle towards solving those crimes.
And like you said, it's completely nonpartisan.
Right, exactly. Both sides of the aisle. I mean, this is a win for everybody. This is a win for Floridians and Americans. How do you think this will affect other states, though, adopting this?
It depends on how successful it is. The more cases that get solved, the more cold cases that get solved, the more answers that we know, then other states will, maybe we've once again taken the lead and other states will want to adopt it.
Follow suit. Yep. Any last thoughts?
No, I think that covers it. I'm excited. It'll be curious to see what happens in the next few years.
Yeah, me too. Well, we'll be following this story closely and keep you guys up to date on everything going on with our state attorney's office as well, and with what our state attorney general is doing. So with that, we're going to sign off, and really appreciate you tuning in. Again, go to floridadaily.com, and subscribe. But another great edition here at the Florida Daily Show. Thank you so much.